Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 50 by 50, Whatever Happened to the Harvard Class of 1976. I am Michael Conniff, your host. We are we like to think of ourselves as the bicentennial class, and I'd like to welcome a very special member of that class, Sonnet Takahisa. Hello, Sonnet.
Hi, Michael. Great to see you.
Live from Brooklyn. I was talking about this. Do you remember Mary Maha?
Of course.
I was talking to her about this, and I said, we were friends at school, right? And she said, yeah, definitely. And then we figured out that we had been in Boston at the same time and New York at the same time, but we had never connected after school. And you and I are a little bit like that. I lived in Brooklyn for a couple of years, and in Carroll Gardens, and then in Borum Hill. And I didn't realize you're a Brooklyn native.
Born and bred.
Born and bred. So, and really probably just like any other Japanese Jewish kid, right?
Exactly.
That was a very unique New York combination, I think, right?
I think it's getting less unique, but it was pretty unique at the time.
And I noticed, I think in one of the things you wrote, that you actually celebrate some Japanese holidays. Is that right?
Yeah, my dad wasn't particularly into being Japanese. He was a frustrated Shakespearean actor.
Oh, wow.
And as a Japanese American, he didn't get too far. So that's why I have the name Sonnet, because he likes Shakespearean sonnets.
Oh, that's nice.
So, but we did, when I was growing up, we went to Japanese festivals, and he tried to introduce us to as much as he could, but he wasn't very entrenched in the traditions.
Were you raised Jewish in that regard?
My mom's family, my mom had a sister and her parents were around, and we did seders with them, and we continue to do seders with my cousins. So we did Christmas, we did Hanukkah, we did Passover.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, we were pretty mixed.
And it's interesting. I haven't thought about this till this conversation, but were there many Japanese in our class, Japanese Americans in our class?
There were more than haven't seen very many in your podcast, Michael. But there were a few. There were a few. I mean, when we got to school at Harvard, it was too soon after the 1965 immigration law changes. So now there are many, many, many more Asian Americans that are in academic settings. But at the time, there were not that many. And people kind of knew each other. I was remembering that I went to a lecture by a good, well-known education tech person, and I was going up to him at the end to thank him for his lecture, and he said, "Hi, Sonnet." I was like, "How did you know me?" He said, "I know you from the yard. You used to have long hair. I used to see you across." And he said, "You're one of the few Asian American women." So people knew each other.
Yeah, but it was a very, very small minority in the class of 76, right?
True. Yes.
And what happened in 1965 to change things? I'm not aware of that.
Just that many more people were let into the country, so that there was a huge influx of Asian Americans who came in from different countries. I am so not like most of your other guests. I'm not an academic. I'm not well-schooled or well-scholared. I'm not into politics. I read the news, but I'm not. So I can't give you the actual information, but I do know that it changed. And in my high school class in Brooklyn, there were some 5,000 kids in my high school class. And I think there was one other Asian American kid at that point in
The
time.
whole class, that's incredible. So the obvious question would be, to what degree, by the time you got to Harvard, did that weigh on you, if it did?
It's been interesting. I've become a groupie, Michael. So I've watched most of your podcasts, as many as I could
Well,
find.
that's really nice of you. I appreciate that. And you know how I know people are watching them? They're starting to complain.
What are they complaining about? I'm so impressed by your
Yeah.
vast ability to speak to so many different people and get into
Well,
some really interesting
well,
conversations.
I appreciate that, but no, I'm sort of half joking, but I do mean it. It's like one person said, "Oh, I wish you'd ask me all these other questions," and I'm like, we have an hour, we do what we can do. But going back to you, and I'm just wondering whether you felt being the member of what at the time seemed like a very small minority. Um, did that make it harder for you to be there?
Well, I mean, you've had some interesting conversations with some of the women in our class.
Yeah.
But when I got to Harvard, I was in Harvard Yard, so that was new and different. I
Yeah.
was only 16 because I skipped twice,
Oh my
and
God.
I was half Asian. So I had a lot of things that were very different, and I had a name like Sonnet and a last name like Takahisa. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that made me feel different and not part of the. And I was not used to being in a place where people went to church on Sunday because where I grew up in Brooklyn, everybody was Jewish, and Saturday was the Sabbath.
Right. So everything was different.
Everything was really different for me. Yeah.
So, given that, what kind of were you able to latch on to, hold on to, find to sort of make you feel welcome?
Eventually, yeah. I mean, you asked other women this question. I mean, it was pretty overwhelming for me at 16 coming in and the ratio. And I remember at one point thinking, I'm just going to become a nun. I can't deal with this.
Now, Sonnet, you're not going
I
to
have
believe
no Catholic in me.
you're not going to believe this. I've written a book a novel in the voice of a nun. So if you need any advice,
Chips. Yeah.
yeah, I'm your guy. But
So,
so you
and,
thought about
and,
being a
I,
nun.
and I didn't drink. I didn't drink. I didn't do drugs. Ted Feldman said, "You went to Lincoln High School and you didn't do drugs? What did you have, a paper bag over your head?" So I was an
Well,
odd person,
yeah,
but I think I got more comfortable. I mean, I found, I started going out with my college boyfriend in freshman year and was part of his circle of friends.
was he
Um,
older? Was he an upperclassman?
no, he was in our class. He lived in Hurlbut.
And can we name him? Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah. Joe Barcher he
Oh
became
gosh,
Joseph Barcher.
so sorry to hear about Joe's
Yeah.
passing. He was such a sweetheart, such a good
Well,
guy.
that's not the term I would call him, but even though I was with him for about 15 years, but
No, no kidding. No
yeah.
kidding. And very talented photographer,
Yes,
very noted photographer, got,
yes,
had a really substantial career to say the least. I was so sorry to hear. And he did that big exhibit about the newspapers because I was a
right.
newspaper person. So I certainly took note of that and that was mentioned in his obituaries.
Which very, yeah.
I didn't realize that. So what I remember is extremely pretty girl from New York. That's how I looked at you.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
and I'm wondering whether being from New York made you a little tougher, made you kind of, and also it made you used to sort of different types of people being around all the time, that kind of thing. Did
I
that help?
guess so. I guess it helped. I mean, I think my parents went through a lot. We actually live a block from when I was a baby. My parents brought me to this neighborhood where we live now. They rented a place.
Where you live
There
right
was
now?
where I live right now in Lefferts Gardens. And there was a petition signed to keep them out of the neighborhood because they were an interracial couple and they had a baby that was me.
Oh my gosh.
So my parents, I think, had a toughness that they passed on to me and a sense of just get through it and get it done. Do it.
Did you feel, going back to your neighborhood, did you feel discrimination? Did people say, nasty things to you? Was there
Not by
anything?
the time, not by the time my husband and I moved here. It's
How
a
about
very
when you were a
different time.
kid? When you were a kid?
And we moved from this neighborhood to the projects, to some projects in Canarsie. So I
Okay.
grew up in Canarsie and then in Brighton Beach.
Oh,
So
okay.
very, so, so I mean, I was in a public high school. There were over 5,000 kids. I worked hard. Was in the top 10 of the class, and
Of a class of 5,000.
yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah.
That's pretty
Well,
darn good.
my parents made me work my ass off. That's what I can say.
Was it your Japanese father or your Jewish mother or both?
I think it was both.
Okay.
And at one point, somebody asked me that question at Harvard, and I said, I don't know which is which anymore. It's all now just mixed up in me, and
Yeah.
it's who I am.
That's who you are, yeah. And so at Harvard, did you ever feel now of course Asian students are everywhere on every campus, like to an
Yeah.
enormous degree. But back then, did you ever feel anyone? Did you feel people were looking at you or treating you differently or treating you badly, anything like that?
Again, I never knew why people were, is it because you're a woman? Is it because
Right.
I was Asian? In I guess my sophomore and my junior year, this is when ethnic studies classes, there were none happening. And people were starting to develop around and it wasn't black power.
Yeah.
And there was,
African
in
Americans.
the West Coast, there was a lot of Asian American identity raising. So there was a TA, and he put together a seminar, an Asian American Studies seminar. And there were about 15 of us, I think. And that was a pretty powerful experience for me going to that seminar. Um, there were mixed classes. And it was the first time I was with people who had talked about what it was like to have been made fun of. I mean, I wasn't very Japanese and I wasn't very Jewish. We were kind of neutral, but still with my last name, people thought of me as Japanese.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty powerful seminar, and we met at the Bureau of Study Council, and there was a man who worked there who was the faculty, I guess the official faculty person, and two TAs, one a white guy and one a Chinese American woman.
Do you remember
And
do you remember the name of the person there? Because this just came up in a recent podcast.
the person who I met with, or who had it, was Kyo Morimoto. He was a Japanese
Okay, yeah,
American man.
that's a different person. But somebody else brought up that I'd never heard of that place. You just mentioned.
There was a guy, Bill somebody, who did a very, very
Yeah, that's the one.
powerful to hell and back
Your
lecture.
our classmate Joan Brager just told me about that it had a huge impact. It helped her get into graduate school. It was a big deal for her. So it was a big deal for you too. Did you start to like look at being Japanese a little differently?
Well, but when I got to Harvard, I actually majored in East Asian studies. So after I graduated from high school, we went to Japan as a family for the first time. And there were all these white people on the plane speaking Japanese, which drove me nuts. So that's when I decided to major in East Asian studies when I got to Harvard.
Did you speak Japanese at that point? Oh, that's funny. So
Not at all.
you're an American. You're an American
Yeah.
kid from New York, from Brooklyn. It just so happens that you look Japanese. When you were doing that course, and I want to talk about much more than this, but when you were doing that course, were you? I'm wondering whether the Japanese internment was subject matter of that course.
Not of that course, but I had done a paper in high school
Oh,
on the internment camp. And I was doing, for me at the time, was like original research because there weren't very few books written about it at that
is that
point.
right?
So I was looking at old newspapers and old magazines in the Grand Army Plaza Library.
Yeah.
And my teachers, some of them didn't know about it. So they passed it around the history social studies department in my high school.
I think, not to segue into current politics, but I think there's something like 80,000 people in detention camps right now as we speak. I mean, it's astonishing I was a history major, and as you were, and you sort of history really does repeat itself. You're like, oh, that'll never
Scary.
happen again, and it's not only happening, but it's just as worse, maybe in some ways even worse, if that's possible.
Right. It can't happen here. That was my dad's mantra, the Sinclair Lewis book. It can't happen here, and it keeps
Yeah,
happening.
and it keeps happening. When you started to learn about when you started to go into the East Asian studies. I remember taking a great course in Japan by Reischauer, Edwin Reischauer. He had been ambassador. You remember
Yep.
that course?
That was the course.
There was
The
only
East
one.
Asian Studies 101.
Yeah, there was only one problem. He was kind of reading from the textbook, which he had written. And I was like, "Does
There
he
was a
realize that?"
Chinese, there was a Chinese studies professor too, but for my parents, my mom went to Brooklyn College and my dad went to UCLA for a little while. So for them, for me getting into Harvard was a big deal.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
that was very exciting for them. And then for me to take a class with Reischauer was like, oh my God. So it was pretty
So they
exciting.
knew who he was. They knew he had been the ambassador. It was
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
he was very good. My mother's family is from Brooklyn as well, by the way. So I go back at least two generations. When you were at Harvard and you were I remember you, in the Elliott House dining hall. Always with a smile on your face, always cheerful. Was the experience for you, essentially a positive one, or or do you remember more of the ups and downs?
No, it was pretty positive. I mean, I had friends. I spent some time in Elliott House. I spent a lot of time in Adam's house with Joe and his roommates. I was like the little sister to these six guys, and then and typed their papers and that kind of stuff. And then when I wrote my thesis, my senior year, I spent a lot of time in Quincy House with Nancy Chang and Karen and Laura Snetman. So I kind of bounced around the houses.
But it was a relatively. You felt it was a good experience for you.
Yeah, I wasn't one of the people like you, smart ones, who took a year off to sort of make sense of it and find yourself. I just plowed on through. Um, I think one of the things that was pretty powerful was at the end of that Asian American Studies seminar, after we got through everybody sort of commiserating about being made fun of and what our experience has been, people started to turn on white people. And at that point I had, because the white people were the perpetrators of the bullying, et cetera. And at that point I said, wait a minute, I'm half white. So that was another conflict. So, but it was good because it came to me to say, okay, I am in between. I'm mixed, and that's who I am, and I can be a connector. And that I think that's what put me on my pathway going forward.
You,
When I East Asian Studies, you had to do a thesis paper. So I spent the summer before my senior year in Japan. I went on my own, and I wanted to originally interview kids who were mixed like me in Japan and see what their lives were like. But my Japanese wasn't good enough. So I ended up interviewing Western-born women who were married to Japanese men. I don't have any idea how I got to them, but I found a whole bunch of women and I interviewed them and wrote them up. And 3 years later, when I was at an Asian Studies conference, somebody did her PhD on the exact same topic.
oh, you're kidding. The
And
same.
I said, I know who she's talking about. I know who she's talking, even though obviously there were no names. I mean, I got to do some really important things. I did some theater. I took dance classes. I did folk dancing. I had a boyfriend for most of the time. So I was fine. It wasn't, I don't think Harvard had its mitts into me very deeply, but I had a very pleasant experience.
That's great. Now, I'm wondering, with given looking at the East Asian studies and being half Japanese as a way to sort of learn more about that side of who you were and your family, was there something equivalent on the Jewish side? Did you feel like caught in the middle, or did you feel like I want to know about both these sides?
Well,
So
my mother was upset and tried to get my sister to take Hebrew.
to kind of
And my
balance you
sister,
out.
yeah, but my sister foiled those hopes and ended up taking Serbo-Croatian because she was doing Serbo-Croatian dancing. So we didn't make my mom that happy.
That did, she wasn't a
But
big
I
fan.
felt I knew a lot about my Jewish side, partly because my dad had no family left, just one distant cousin that we finally met in San Francisco. But my mom's family was near us in Brooklyn, so we
You saw
spent
them.
time with them and we went to Seder and did
Sure.
Jewish holidays with them. And all my friends, frankly, were Jewish
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
grew up. And
Yeah. You're in New York, not surprisingly. Did your dad serve in the? Was he born in America or born in Japan?
no, he was born in America.
Oh wow,
He's
it must have been a
second generation. And
difficult.
like I said, he wanted to be a Shakespearean actor.
What did he end up doing, Sonnet?
He ended up starting a business as a salesman. He represented Asian objects and artifacts. He sold to museum gift shops and Chinese, stores and things like that. And my mom and he had a business together, so they
Oh, good.
imported, and he went out and did the selling, and she managed the shipping.
Okay, well that's
And when they
interesting.
had to fix things, I was the fixer.
How so? What do you mean? It was it when deals went sour?
No, when things got broken.
When things broke. You were the arts and crafts person, essentially. And so, where does the artistic side come for you? Because I should mention, you had a long career in museums, obviously a deep interest in the arts, and curating the arts. But where did that come from?
Well, first of all, museums are not just art museums. I just want to say that. Probably came from going with my dad would go do a sales call at a museum gift shop, and my mom would take my sister and me into the galleries. So I felt very comfortable in museums. And when I graduated from Harvard, I wasn't quite ready. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I just knew I didn't want to go to graduate school. People in the Yenching Library were always pale, and you had to know all those characters and kanji. And so I ended up, well, during college, I had been working at the gift shop at the Museum of Comparative Zoology. So that was my work.
Isn't that interesting that your parents did that and then you did that at college and sort of in effect what you did after that seems to somehow be a kind of a logical extension.
My senior year, I created an independent study. Again, where I had the chutzpah to do this, I don't know where it came from. But I went to the director of the Peabody Museum and said I wanted to do an independent study. So I learned about the different careers within museums. I went to the conservator. I saw them using domestic beetles to clean out bones. I did an inventory of paintings of Native Americans. And the director in my weekly or biweekly, or I don't remember, I don't think I met with him that often, one day said, I have the answer. All those people who want to touch things. And he brought out some of the fake Japanese food, that they put in the windows in Japan. It looks like ramen or it looks like tempura, but it's made out of plastic. He said, all we have to do is make plastic replicas of the things in our museums, and that'll make people happy. And I thought, no, that's not quite right. So
What were you thinking? What were you thinking would make them happy?
I think experiencing the actual authentic objects is really, really important.
Yeah.
So there were two museums that had Japanese programs in them. One was in Salem, and one was the Children's Museum in Boston. So Salem was a bit too far. Still had a lot of friends who were in Cambridge. So I took the job at the Children's Museum in Boston.
This is after Harvard, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So there was an internship that was going to pay, I think it was $9 a week or something ridiculous. But if I waited a few months, I would be eligible for the minority internship,
Oh my
which
goodness.
would pay $24 a week. So I held out for that.
Reverse discrimination strikes again.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well, they were
$24.
trying to get people of color into the museum world. There were not very many at the time, mostly because who can afford to go work in places where you don't make money?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
by the time the internship came around, I had already been volunteering so much at the museum. There was a tea house that had been turned into a Japanese home, and I was taking care of the objects in the collection and starting to do programming. And I wrote a grant and got a grant to recreate Japanese festivals. I totally forgot about that. Recreate 4 Japanese festivals at the Children's Museum: Girls'
Nice.
Day, Boys' Day, the Summer Bonodori Festival, and New Year's Day. And so I worked with expat Japanese workers who were in the Boston area who had brought their families. I worked with students from Harvard and MIT, and we did these festivals. I got a drummer from Wesleyan University, and so I managed to do this and then ended up having a great job at the Children's Museum for a number of years.
At which museum? The Children's
The
Museum.
Children's Museum of Boston.
And I want to get into your curation in a moment, but tell me, you said is it okay to talk about you and Joe?
Yeah.
You said you were together 15. I didn't even realize you guys were a couple. I didn't know Joe that well, but I knew a lot of people who knew Joe. I think Joel Feldman, Bobby Gordon, Andy
Yep.
Weber. That was kind of the part of this Ted Feldman.
Ted Feldman. Yep.
Yeah,
Michael Brown.
yeah, that was
Ted.
kind of
Tom Wright.
uh
Tom Wright.
that was kind of part of the circle, right? So those were actually like I just talked to Joel Feldman like 2 days
No,
ago. Yeah, he's
I haven't seen that one yet.
yeah, yeah. That's well, I haven't done that one. I'm doing that I think in a day or so. But so you actually were friends with a lot of people I knew and liked. I'm curious. You said you were together 15 years. So from freshman year for the next 15 years, essentially?
Well, not not all the way straight through. We broke up once. He went to California. Well, we moved to Seattle together.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Um, Bobby Gordon was living in Seattle with a David, Melody from the class afterward. And they were living in Seattle. So Joe wanted to go to Seattle, and I got into the University of Washington. So we went out to Seattle together. We were living there a few years, and we decided to get married, which both of our families wanted us to do, and we did. But
You did get married.
we got married for a brief amount of time, and then
Right.
started to all fall apart. And I came back east for a job at the Brooklyn Museum, and Joe stayed in Seattle. And we tried long distance for a while, but it just didn't work.
Uh-huh.
And then he came back to New York, and we toasted the 15th anniversary of our first date when we decided to get divorced.
Oh, geez. Where was your first date? It must have been in Harvard Square.
Yeah, I was walking around Harvard Square, yes.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Um,
All the way up to Porter Square.
yeah. Yeah. And Bobby Gordon's name has come up a couple times. He was, you're among the few Japanese Americans in the class. I'm among the few novelist Americans in the class. I don't think we have a ton of novelists. Though people, later in life, they start to write a novel, and that's not what I mean. I mean, I've written them for 45 years, so
I noticed that.
so that's a little different. But Bobby was a real inspiration to me because he was a serious fiction writer long before I was. And I used to send things to me. He'd send them back. I used to read his stuff. He was very, very good, and that was really sad. Um, so
Yeah, I kept in touch. I would see him in Seattle and visit him long after I had left Seattle.
yeah,
Losing him was really, really sad.
yeah. It's really. I mean, none of us are getting out of it alive, Sonnet. I understand.
It's true.
We have to kind of deal with it, but it doesn't necessarily make it any easier. So at this point in your life, you've been married, you've been divorced, you have a master's, you've done some cool stuff in museums, and you've come back to New York. I assume you came back to Brooklyn, right?
I came back and I was the head of all the school, youth, and family programs at the Brooklyn Museum.
So you must have loved that.
I did. It was great. And just making connections between teachers and children, and the Brooklyn Museum is an incredible collection and underutilized, now less underutilized, but at that point, we could do all kinds of really interesting things because we weren't battling tourists. So we could do great things with the students in the galleries.
Are there some things you did that you're particularly proud of and still think about?
Yeah, we started some intensive partnerships with schools and with multiple grade levels, which is how I met my husband Hollis. The New York State Council on the Arts was trying to replace the loss of funding that had been taken away for arts education in New York City schools. And while we weren't doing art making per se, we were exposing young people to arts and to the arts of the collection. And so we had funding to do some really in-depth partnerships that really demonstrated the power of being in the museum for the young people. We professionalized the internship program there and made it into a paid internship for the first time in education. And I'm so proud that 40 years later, that's still going strong. It's changed, but it was going strong. And then out of those partnerships came the opportunity. It was when the education world was trying to reform itself. And there was a movement to create new small schools with different themes and different kinds of opportunities. So we proposed 2 schools in which the Brooklyn Museum was a partner, would be a strong partner. One was a Brooklyn-based school with the garden, the Botanic Gardens, the museum, the library, and one other. That got funded. And then the other one, which was nearer and dearer to my heart, was the New York City Museum School, which used the Brooklyn Museum, the Jewish Museum, the Children's Museum of Manhattan, American Museum of Natural History, and South Street Seaport. They were all intensive partners of the school, and we created ultimately a middle school where the students were at the museums 3 days a week learning their regular curriculum.
Oh, wow.
And it still exists now.
Anything like that. Yeah, I've never heard anything like that. So it became part of the core education.
It still exists now as a high school.
Oh, that's terrific. And how long were you? How long did that program? How long were you in charge of that program? How long did that last?
For 10 years. So we started it. We proposed it in '93. The first year we couldn't find a director to open the school. I'm not, well, it doesn't matter, I can say it now. I wasn't licensed. I didn't have a Board of Ed certificate. So we were looking for the right person to take on this opportunity, and we couldn't find anyone. The museum people were too museumy, and the school people were too schooly. So in the end, I was part of the planning team, and they turned on me at one point and said, if this school's going to happen, you have to do it. And Hollis and our son was about 3 at the time. Oh, wow. And I remember it was Hollis's birthday. It was a Hanukkah party at the preschool. I was like, how can I run a school and still have this life as a mom and a wife? But I ended up doing it. I said I'd do it if I could have a partner. And so the Board of Ed partnered me with actually a Harvard grad from 1983 who I had met. We had actually rejected him 1 year as a principal, but we became co-directors and founded the school, and it opened in '95.
And that worked out.
It worked out terrifically, yeah.
Yeah.
We had an amazingly adept, smart, dedicated faculty that we all worked together. We had museum people from each of the museums who were dedicated to our school. So the students had an unbelievable access to the different museums. And so when they were learning earth science, they were in the Museum of Natural History. And when they were learning American history, they were either at the New York Historical Society or at the Brooklyn Museum. Or when they were learning East Asian studies or about Buddhism and Hinduism, they were at the Brooklyn Museum. So it
What
was
an
incredible.
education. Yeah, what an education. Do you think that the outcome was different because of that for those kids? I mean, I'm assuming it was. I'm curious how it was different.
Well, we were really adamant too that this was not a gifted and talented school. I mean, it was not a school for special gifted and talented kids. We wanted it to be a school that would appeal to the spectrum of academic abilities and class abilities and class backgrounds. So for, some kids who had never been to museums, we had kids like that whose parents didn't know what museums were all about. And then we had the children of some of the curators and staff of the different museums that were part of our school. So it was hard because when you have that kind of academic breadth and the needs are so different, to differentiate the instruction was difficult. But again, that's something that came out of my time in museums and my belief that learning in museums provides you a model for a way to get engaged with the world, to get curious, to ask questions, to do research, and to models for figuring out how do you present what you've learned.
It makes me think that those kids were not bored.
It wasn't always easy for them. And there were people who thought that the reading the labels in the galleries was too complicated for some of our struggling readers. And yet for other kids, they took them much further along. So it was hard. We had to differentiate a lot, and that was a tough thing. It's a tough thing in any school.
Sure. What did you do after that? After the school, what was your next step?
I can't remember. I think I went back to I guess I went to an organization that was helping to create other new schools that were theme-based. And we had really developed this notion of museum learning in a process. And so we worked with other outside not-for-profit partners who were interested in transforming the way of learning within their career or profession to a school-based model. We actually talked to some journalist people because journalism was a great model for people to learn, how they learn, how you get information, how you weigh information, how you present it.
And journalists need jobs, so that's a good one.
It was a great idea for a school. I don't think it ever came off, but so I worked on that for a few years, and then I went back to museums. I got an offer I sort of couldn't refuse. It was to be the founding education director of the 9/11 Memorial Museum.
I saw that, and I wanted to talk to you about that. What date did you start?
I started in 2010.
2010. So 9 years after the attacks on the World Trade Center. What were you trying to do?
Well, my job was children and families. And so we were talking first about doing an exhibition for children, kind of like Daniel's story at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C.
I'm not familiar with that.
There's an exhibition they created a character named Daniel and he talked about his experiences going through World War II, a German boy, and what it was like to live through the various horrors of World War II. So the question was, how do you create something similar for people who are going to bring their kids or should bring their kids, or how do you teach kids about 9/11? So that was my first, my first charge. But it was also, how do you begin to create curriculum materials around something that was still highly charged and very difficult to talk about? It was a very complicated moment in time. It was complicated for that institution. So it was a hard job. I was part of the team that was thinking about the main exhibit and worked with the exhibition design firm as well as the other staff. So we put out some materials. We did some oral histories with some of the survivors, talking about what the events meant. But it was a really hard job. And when I started to bring in kids, people were so surprised that even kids who were 17 or 18 by 2010, so they had lived through it, they didn't really know what had happened, even New York kids. So it was a big eye-opening of like, how do you teach about this very, very complex, very emotional moment in history?
Were you? I know it was a museum downtown New York.
It is down. It wasn't, it didn't exist at the time we were
I know
creating it.
there was a mosque down there that got to be pretty controversial. Were
Yes,
they in the? You know what I'm talking about? Were they in the midst of
absolutely.
this? Yeah.
Well, only because I brought one of the people who was the founder of that mosque, the wife of the imam. I brought her onto my educational advisory committee, which did not make people happy.
Yeah, I remember. What was the imam's name?
Now I totally,
You know who I'm talking about, though.
his wife, the wife's name, she's Daisy Khan. That's his wife's name.
No, it's interesting because I asked because I was doing a political talk show at the time, and I remember looking into him very closely and finding that he was saying one thing to American audiences and another thing to
Huh.
Muslim audiences, or overseas, let's say overseas audiences. But that too is a story for another day. So this one's difficult, but it's also contemporaneous in the sense that the emotions and the implications are kind of still in 2010 at least staring you in the face. How long did you do that job, that curation?
I guess I did that for about 4 years.
Okay. And did you ever at any point say, I've had enough of museums? Did you ever think, was there
I,
other?
I think, and I said to you in the beginning, museums aren't just art museums.
Yeah, I can see.
So,
Yeah.
so for the school, I was working with so many different kinds of museums. We were thinking about how do you use the Seaport Museum to teach something about physics? Or how do you talk about astronomy with the way that sea captains used devices to measure the stars to get their directions.
Was this
So
happening around the country? Other people like you, or was this something that
there were a few, but most of them were more elementary school.
Yeah.
So it was more like field trips, and fun. But we were really trying to embed the use of the museums, not only in the curriculum as content, but also, as I was saying, as a way to learn and engage with the world. So our students spent time at the museum studying the objects, studying the ways they were curated, studying the ways they were exhibited, studying the ways they were conserved, and then thinking about how would they tell a particular story or information or historical event through the models that museums offered, exhibitions, catalogs, public programs. So it's pretty broad.
Do you have a favorite museum or a favorite exhibition in New York?
No, I mean, everything is so different.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to say that. I mean, I have exhibitions that I've loved, but I don't have a favorite.
Did you have to essentially bend the museum to your will to do all of this or any of it?
Some of it, yeah. Yeah,
Because
the relationships were really, the relationships with the museums and what I got out of the museums for our students and for our families was much more than I thought I could get. It was all on this, a handshake and a spit and a promise, and that was it.
yeah.
So the kids got to do an amazing amount of things, and it was hard to sustain that level of involvement for the museums.
So this is where the Takahisa chutzpah comes in, I assume, right?
Yes,
Not
yes.
being afraid to ask, right?
Right.
So I wanted to make sure we had time. Sonnet, I read your, here's the big book.
Yeah. I got it. I got mine. I got
gotta
mine.
tell you, I went the opposite of a lot of people. I had written longer things in previous books, I wrote a really short thing this time. I was like, everyone's going to write really long. And you know what? Some people wrote 5 pages and more.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I hesitate to say too much because obviously they wanted to get it off her chest. But it's a strange little. I was a history. It's a strange little bit of history because it's really, this is how people want to be remembered. It's in the book, right? And people feel they can really. I'm editorializing, but I think a lot of people feel they can really control that, maybe more than
The
they.
narrative.
Maybe more.
Control the narrative.
Control the narrative. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I understand that, but it's just interesting. Now you were nice and tidy. You had a good length, but not too much. But in that, I was very sorry to see that you were dealing with Parkinson's, and I see that my reportorial eye tells me you're sitting in a wheelchair. So
I actually just use this for sitting because it's the most comfortable chair I have.
oh,
But
okay.
I'm still somewhat mobile, a little more less balanced. I don't know what's Parkinson's, I don't know what's old age, I don't know what's spinal stenosis. It just sucks. It just sucks.
Yeah, yeah, that was that. I have a good friend out here with Parkinson's, and it's like it's catastrophic. It's tough. But let me ask you this: you had a journey even figuring out what was going on, right?
It took about 2 years.
Uh huh. And were people giving you false leads or false assumptions about what it
I
might?
think my Parkinson's symptoms came out after I had spinal surgery.
Okay.
So I had some tremors, but nothing like after the shock to my body of the spinal surgery. I had two at once. So I had cervical and lumbar within a week.
And had that
And
been
that was in December 24.
how long had your back been bothering you?
Oh, for a year. I mean, I was pretty active. I was exercising, going to the gym regularly.
Hmm.
Um, but, and then suddenly got really weak, and the one doctor said it was the stenosis. So I put off having the surgery because I just didn't feel strong enough, but they said, no, you really need it. So I did the surgery, and I came back within a couple of months with physical therapy, and then it just started going down again. So that was when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, about a little over a year ago.
How are you feeling now, today?
A little shaky,
On your
just
feet?
harder to control things.
Shaky on your feet, shaky in your hands.
Yeah, I don't tremor as much. I don't twitch the way some people do.
Yeah.
Luckily I can still go up and down my stairs. I do it very slowly. We walk around. Right now I'm gearing up. I'm not going to the reunion because
Oh,
I just didn't think I could handle it. But
yeah.
we're gearing up to go to a wedding in Toledo, Spain in September.
Oh, that's a big
So I'm
deal.
trying to strengthen up. And our son lives in California, in Los Angeles. So we're going to do a practice trip in the summer to visit him. So gearing up for that.
So what would I'm sorry you won't be there. Of course, you'll be there in spirit
Very
as an
much so.
important member of our class. But what would you say to the people you're not going to be able to see in person? Like what would you like to say to them after 50 years?
I, I have to say I've been enjoying your podcast so much because some I didn't know at all, who I didn't know, but Ted Kalori lived in the suite below me freshman year. So I spent a lot of time with him freshman year, but it was so great to hear his stories. And Mary and I lived in a huge group house after graduating. So it was great to see Mary. So, the warmth that I feel when Joe and I got divorced, I sort of stopped with the Harvard connections.
Enough with these Harvard guys.
Yeah. And when Bobby died, it was really sad.
Yeah.
It was fun to see John Dorfman on your podcast.
Yeah.
So I have such fond memories, and I'm so amazed and impressed by how much living everybody has done and all the contributions that everybody has made. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry to not be there to celebrate that aspect of our reunion.
I've been pleasantly surprised by, if I could look at your work and your life in a lot of different ways, but one way that I think it's fair to frame it is to say that, you were very, very deeply involved in your community, right? And you were very deeply involved with, sort of trying to make things better. And there's a lot of that in our class, like more than I expected. And I'm not talking about, the guys, pardon me, guys from Wall Street, the guys that went to Wall Street, made $1 zillion and became philanthropists. That's great. I'm not knocking that, but I'm saying, no, I'm just talking more like a guy I didn't even know named Doug Schmidt. I don't know if you've listened to that one. But,
I haven't seen that one yet.
Incredibly dedicated to his community, to his church, just does a ton of stuff to this day. And there's, and probably, I'm guessing, doesn't like particularly pat himself on the back for it. He just kind of does it. And I think Ted's like that too. And I think and John Dorfman and the list is long, right? I think for some, one of the things of this is, as I do it, I sort of starting to form theories about our class. What's kind of the glue? What's the common thread? And then what are the things that kind of divided people? Like, your Radcliffe class came in at a very awkward moment, which I thought my only thought about it at the time was that, oh, this is cool, women in the art for the first time. I'm really happy to be here. I was a history major. That was history. That was great. But I realize now that it wasn't all that great for lots of people. And
you've said that you've raised that as an awareness or growing awareness throughout these, and I've noticed that. I think what's interesting is, I don't know if you remember Carlton Bush. Has he been in touch with you?
I didn't know him.
He was in Gray's Hall also, where I was. But I've been in touch with Carlton pretty recently. And what's interesting is there are a lot more people of color in our class. And paying attention to sort of what life was like for people of color, even people half colored or halfly colored. I don't know what the right word is.
That's where I have a lot of work to do on the podcast. Actually, I've started out. At first, I was just like, I got to get enough that people realize it's a real thing.
It's very cool. It's very cool. It's very cool.
It's taken on a life of its own, which is fantastic and really gratifying. But I also am very, I did speak to Danny Jiggets, who was the first African-American football captain, an All-American. And I had a great talk with him, and I think he's going to do it. It sounds like he's going to do it. He was a radio guy, he's a broadcaster. So, yeah, he was in sports broadcasting for his whole career. But what I realized is a couple things. One is that I didn't feel like I don't know what the percentage of black students was in our class, but I'm guessing it did not mirror the national average. I think it was fewer, right? Robert Kraft had 3 black roommates, right? But I don't know any other white person who had any black roommates. That's not to say they didn't.
Freshman year, I was roomed with Mary Johnson Osarim and Mickey. Forget Mickey's name. She's passed now. But Mary Johnson would be an interesting person for you to reach out to.
A black person.
Yep.
A black woman.
Yep.
The way Harvard was and is, they put me with Tim Benstead because we were lacrosse players. They probably put you with them because, none of them are white.
No, our 4th roommate was Marion Craighill, who's an obstetrician.
Who I'm going to talk to. I was supposed to talk to earlier today. Actually.
Well, do tell her I said hi. But we were connected, I think, because she had spent time in Japan.
Oh, right.
So they had different reasons for putting us all together.
Yeah, yeah.
But Gray's was a pretty mixed, in terms of the men.
A mixed bag, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, listen. I'm, I just hope your health holds up.
Thanks.
And we hope that for all our classmates. But I think you're a strong person, the Sonnet I remember. And the other thing, part of being strong when things are going bad is that, you just have, you're a person who, like I said, always had a smile on her face. I can't think of a moment where you weren't cheerful when I saw you, at least in the Elliott House dining hall. And those are the kind of things that can help. They don't, they're not going to make it go away, but
That and an incredible husband and
yeah,
son.
yeah,
So
no, that's great.
very lucky.
Well, it sounds to me, Sonnet, like you've had a career you can be proud of. You got to do what you wanted to do, and you were very innovative, which I didn't realize. I figured you were just kind of hibernating in various cushy museum jobs. So it's
No,
yeah,
just like you created a school, I created one too.
yeah. There you go. There you go. It's a small club. It's a small club, but a
Martha
big.
Malkin also created a school.
Who did?
Martha Malkin?
Oh, okay. We'll have to talk to her. But listen, I really appreciate your doing this. Um, you
I
know,
appreciate your doing this.
well, thank you, and I always, you're always a favorite of mine. It actually makes me feel better. I didn't know Joe was going out with you, but I've always kicked myself. Why didn't I ask out Sonnet Takahisa? She was from New York like me. She was super cute, and I was. What can I say? I was
Oh,
very slow with the trigger
thanks,
finger.
Michael. That's sweet. Well,
But
I have very fond memories of you. I don't know how much time we spent together, but I definitely have a fondness for you.
it's
So,
funny being in proximity. A lot of these friendships are like we were in proximity for 4 years.
yeah,
And so
orbit in the same orbits.
in the same orbits. And it turns out you were in an orbit I didn't even know you were in with those guys at Adam's house. So that's a whole
Oh
nother.
yeah, I spent a lot of time in that room.
Yeah. Well, listen, everyone's going to be asking for you at reunion, but take care of yourself and
Thank
feel
you.
better. And I hope to see you soon.
Me too.
Okay. Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.